first heard that beautiful piece of music, which is called Women of Ireland, in 1975 when I went to see Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, based on a book by Thackeray. It was slated at the time, the film was, but I thought it was very good, and in fact its sort of status has increased, I'm pleased to know, over the years. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that the previous year I went for the first time to Ireland, to Belfast College of Art, for interview for a lectureship in sculpture there. And I've written about it in this book, but I'm not going to read it out, this particular one. I'm just going to talk to you about it because something happened since I wrote the book, that sort of changed things and made me think more about what had happened in the longer term. And what happened in the shorter term was that I saw an opportunity to go to Ireland on the cheap. I didn't have any money, I'd given up the job at Cambridge. And I was running a gallery as artwork in London with somebody called Nicholas Wegner. He had started it a year before by putting on invented artists, but then he ran out of steam because people realised that they were invented. And then I came along and given up the job at Cambridge. And he had been a fellow Slady like me, and he asked me to join him, and he said, well, I don't know what. I said, well, why don't we have a gallery without any artists at all? And that's what we did, the Gallery London. And one of the shows that I wanted to put on was photographs of the streets of Belfast, where nothing was actually happening. Because at that time, in 1974, the newspapers and TV were full of the troubles of awful explosions and the carnage caused by that terrible conflict that went on for years. And following the old journalistic adage, if it bleeds, it leads. And I wanted to look at the quieter side of Belfast, if I could, and find out the things that were boring there, the ordinary things, how ordinary people got on with their lives, the sort of things that the press weren't interested in, but I was, and I thought a series of images would be very good. And so I decided to take a camera with a 35mm camera with 36 images and choose the half a dozen least interesting ones, the ones without the army in it and all these things going on and terrible murders taking place and so on. And so there was one problem, and that was I didn't have enough money to go to Belfast to do it. And then I saw this advertisement for a lectureship at Belfast College of Art. And I thought, well, if I get a call for interview, which I did, they'll pay my travelling expenses there and back, even though I don't really intend to take a job there. So I felt a bit sort of shitty about that. But anyway, I turned up in Ireland, in Belfast, and was interviewed. And I said that I'd take the job on 2 days a week because I thought I could travel up there. It might be interesting to do it, but I didn't want to go there permanently. After all, I was running this little gallery in London. And they said, no, that's not possible because the other two candidates are interested in advertising a full-time job, and the other two candidates aren't interested in sharing the job with you, or the next candidate isn't. She wants the full-time job, and if you turn it down, I'm afraid we'll have to offer it to the next choice candidate, who was a woman, thin woman with dark hair, I remember, and she was sitting outside in the interview room when I came out and rejected. She was called in, and she was offered the job, and she took it. And she was what you used to say a girl. You can't say use those words nowadays, but anyway, that's what she was. She'd just left Art College Manchester, I think, herself, and so she's a bit younger than me, and maybe 26 or something like that. And anyway, so she was offered the job, and I didn't give it any more thought, except years later, I had a colleague who ran the Surrey Institute of Art and Design, and I ran the Kent Institute of Art and Design, and I'd approached her in 2002 or three, I think it was, to suggest we joined forces, because I was thinking of retiring and getting back to my own studio, and joining these two institutions together to form a university, because we'd have enough students then to apply for university status, 6,500 I think it was, something like that. And she gave it some thought, and she thought about it and that sort of thing, and she's hesitant at first. But anyway, eventually she embraced the idea, and she ended up as the first Vice-Chancellor of the university when I left the institution after it had been formed. And but the sad thing was that in 2000 2 years ago now, it's 2 years ago now, she was on holiday in the Dominican Republic, and she got a terrible tummy infection, and she died. And a terrible shock. I remember being told that. And I mean, we'd had our ups and downs, but even so, I mean, you know, for somebody like that, still relatively young, in the 60s, for that to happen is pretty terrible. And anyway, I ended up asked to write her for the Guardian, write her obituary. I wrote her obituary for the Guardian, and when I was researching it, it suddenly struck me that that girl sitting outside in the interview room, outside the interview room, when I walked out and I turned down the full-time job, and then who started her career there, was her. And I'd never twigged it all the time we'd worked together, but it's only when I looked at the dates and my mind went back to that time that I thought about that. And you know, so, you know, Women of Ireland is probably, and she stayed for years, and her career progressed from there, of course, and ended up as the University Vice-Chancellor of the CBE. But